Hey guys, so I'm going to do a quick little video on how to wire up receptacles. And this is going to show you a few things you need to start with. Just your basic stuff. You also want to add a voltmeter to this in case you need to troubleshoot something. It'll help you out quite a bit. But first thing you need your wire. This is 12-2 Romex. This is actual Romex wire. Then your boxes. There's several different styles. These are just the nail-on type for like new construction. This will mount into that, of course. The wire will run into it. Some of the basic tools you need: a screwdriver, needle nose, side cutters, or diagonal cutters, lineman's pliers, wire strippers. That's not the best pair of strippers, but they work. And this screwdriver right here is interesting. I started to make a separate video just on this, but it's a combo Phillips and straight. It fits these screws perfect on electrical stuff. You can use a regular Phillips or straight, whatever you're used to. Or actually a square drive too will work on these. It's whatever you prefer. And your cover, wire nuts, and also you need staples too for securing your wire. That's your basic stuff you're going to need. You're also going to need a drill with a spade bit, about a 1/2 inch to 3/4, depending on how many wires you got to run through your wall. And yeah, so let's just get started here. Alright, so this is a 250-foot spool with a 12-2 with ground Romex. And you probably think, well, my little project, I can just get by with a 50-foot roll or a 25-foot roll. Nah, most of the time, unless you're doing just a single run, you're not going to be able to. So I highly recommend getting at least a 250-foot roll. And if you're wiring a house, you'll just go ahead and get the 1,000-foot spool, because you're going to need at least 2 or 3 of these, and it's just easier to work off a spool. And I'm going to get ready to start drilling through studs. And I got a 5/8 bit. It makes it just a little bit more easier to pull the wire through. Okay, so I'm going to mount the receptacles about approximately 4 foot off the ground, maybe about 3 foot. I'm not even going to measure because this is just a shed. And the only people that's going to see it is you guys right now. So that's really all that matters. So I got to run the wire through this other wall. We're going to put a receptacle right here, so I'm going to go ahead and start drilling. I just like to have the receptacles pretty high, at least in a garage like this, so you're not constantly bending down just to plug a battery charger or something in. In most houses, it's going to be 18 to 24 inches off the floor. So it depends on what your plans for the house is. But if it's in a garage or a storage shed or something, 3 or 4 foot off the ground is perfect. It's easier to, first of all, it's easier to wire and makes it a little faster, so you're not constantly off the floor. And I just think it's easier to work off of, especially if you got a bunch of stuff laying around like I do in here. So that's why we're going to do this. If you drill directly in the center of the stud, you're going to be less apt to hit a screw or something holding the siding or wall on. And so that's another step you want to make sure you do. So like I said, we're going to put the receptacle right here. And we'll talk about that here in a second. I'm going to go ahead and get the wire, run over here to it, to the first box, and we'll install the box. Another little note, talking about the quantity of wire you need for a job. It adds up really quick. Like this room right here is a 12x12 add-on I did. And so I got to run it around 3 walls. So if there's 36 foot. So if you think, well, a 50-foot spool will be alright. Probably not. Because you got to go that, then halfway up the wall, so it brings it up to 40. Then about halfway back up the ceiling. So right there's almost 50 foot of wire right there. So you got to kind of figure it up in your head a little bit if you're just going to do 1 or 2 rooms like this. Alright, so I got the wire ran close to the breaker box. I like to save it for last to hook to the breaker box, so there's no chance at all of power being on this wire. So the box is going to be mounted here. It's going to have at least 6 inches of wire coming out of it. So we're going to cut it off about 1 foot from the hole here. Should be plain. I got a little bit of slack end if I do need it. And another little note to bring up. These studs in this room, it's just a shed I built. They're on 24-inch centers instead of 16s. And it's still good to run it within these, it's still within spec to run it between these without having to staple it on each one. You can run the Romex 4.5 foot before you have to staple it or anchor it or run it through a stud or something. It has to be anchored within 12 inches of the box. In this case, the hole will serve as the anchor, but we'll be stapling it anyway because there'll be another one running this way. So now let's go ahead and get the box installed. It's pretty straightforward. Like I said, if you're doing something in a house especially, you know, measure this, but right here it's not critical at all. So that's about where we want it, about right here. Also, something else I pointed out before we mount the box, you get these little tabs right here. What these do, you slide it down the wall here, it'll preset it for, I think it's 1/2 inch or 7/16 for your standard drywall thickness. That way when you put your drywall or paneling up, it's going to be level with it. You don't have to guess with it. You don't have to guess with it and try to take a chance of getting it crooked. It just presets it like that. And that's all there is to it. Mount the box. Now, take your screwdriver. We got to knock out this insert in the back. Let's get a close up on that. Okay. You see, you get these little plastic inserts back here, and you got to knock out one side of it, just like that, without getting your screwdriver bit stuck. Just knock out the bottom of it like that. Now you can run your wire up through it without bending it excessively. Okay, so that's the first wire coming in. You got to have at least 6 inches of overhang here sticking out. More the better, just makes it easier to work with in case you have to work on it again. So now what I'm going to do off camera real quick is go ahead and run my second wire into the box here, then we'll look at the actual wiring itself. Alright, so I got the wire ran all the way around to the wall to the next box location. Now I got this stapled down here within 12 inches of exiting the box. And this one is already going through a hole, so that's considered being anchored. But if you're afraid you're going to have a picky inspector, feel free to run this over top and put a staple over both of them. Also, you want to leave the staple kind of loose, just enough for the wire to be able to still move. That way, you know, with expansion and contraction, it's not going to start wearing into the insulation and start arcing or anything. Okay, this is actually a little too much wire sticking out. You can measure it to exactly 6 inches if you want. I'm just going to cut it off about right here. And this is basically the point of what the rough end is considered before you actually start doing the wiring. So if you have to have a rough end inspection done, you'll have to stop right here and then pick up after it passes to do the actual wiring. So that's something else to keep in mind too. Okay, they make a tool that'll go on here. You pull like this and it scores just the yellow insulation here. But I actually can't seem to find mine at the moment, so I have to use a knife. And you got to be really careful when you do this with a knife. Make sure you don't cut into the insulation. Now you can start pulling the wires back. I like to pull that back within about 1 inch of where it's considered the clamp of the box. You want to remove this paper there and on this here, and you can cut all this off inside here. We'll do that in a minute. You also want to make sure you didn't score the insulation on any of the wires here or anything. Trying out my new Spyderco knife. Alright, so I just want to put a little note in on this video, and I'm going to use this same clip on the receptacle video and the light switch videos, so you'll see the same thing twice if you're watching all my videos. But this is the tool I was talking about on stripping the insulation off of the wire here. Instead of using a knife to score, which you always take a chance of cutting your finger or getting into the wire, pick up this tool right here. You see it's got an edge right here on there, and it can also be used for sizing up your wire too. So it's handy for that. But this is actually a little bit different than the other one I got. It's open on one side, so you can just slide the wire in. This one you actually got to feed it through like this, but then you just press down And it scores it just like that for you. Makes it things a lot faster and a lot easier. And safer too. You usually just tear that paper off. And this is where electrician gets labeled as being messy, because we usually just throw it in the floor. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on this one, and we'll be ready to actually wire the receptacle. Okay, now I got to talk for a minute here about this. This is going to be feeding the next receptacle going that way. The power's coming in on this. But if this is your last box on a branch, or if you're just running it straight to one receptacle, you can hook your ground wire directly to your ground screw on here. But in this case, what we're going to have to do is make a pigtail. So we're going to have to twist these together and come off of it with a single wire to go in here. Because a single wire, because if you try to put two wires on one screw, it just don't work and it'll eventually come loose. Been there, done that. So now let me twist these together. So if you ever get any scrap pieces of wire, you want to hang on to them for making pigtails and stuff. Super handy. And kind of get it started by hand. Then twist it real tight. I always like to cut off the end right there. Now you're ready to splice in your third wire for the pigtail. Again, get it started by hand. You can wait and do all three together if you'd rather do it like that. I just like to make sure that your main wire passing through is connected really good. This is actually your most important wire on anything. It's what can potentially save your life someday. Then you're ready to put a wire nut on it. I know it seems pointless to put a wire nut to cover it up, but it's what's required. Now you're going to get all this excess bare copper out of the way, push it all the way towards the back of the box. That way there's no chance of it coming in contact with anything. Now you got your single wire to anchor to your screw there. Everybody's got their own ways of doing it, and the code's been trying to change for years, but you can install these either direction like this, but the code's trying to change it so the ground's up, so just get in the habit of doing it. But I always like to bring the power that's coming in on the top two screws and the power coming out on the bottom. It's just a good habit of getting into. That way everything's consistent in case you ever work on something later on. Now you're ready to strip the insulation off your wires here. You're going to do it about like that, and these little holes are actually for bending the wire like that. It's about what you want. Let me get all these pre-bent off camera and we'll wire it up. A habit I've always been into is just connect the grounds first. The way I always do it, you catch that wire on that little tab, if you can see it. Catch this part of the wire, that tab, and just bend it like that, and you know it's going to stay on there real good. And you can go ahead and tighten this down. You don't want this too tight or it'll strip out, or too loose and the wire will come loose and start arcing. You just want to get it really snug. Alright, now we're ready to hook up your other wires. So this is the neutral coming in. There's three ways you can do this. This is the traditional method, the way I've always done it, just like this. Wrapping the loop around the screw. But you can actually, these have a little plate here where you can keep the wire straight and just slide it in there and clamp it like that if you prefer to do it like that. I've just always put it around the screw. That's just the way I've always done it. And the third method is the type that push in from the back, that either, most of the time they'll just kind of, you stick them in and they hold themselves. I don't particularly trust that. I like doing it like this, the traditional way. I've never had them come loose or anything. Just, once you get a method that you know works, stick with it. Don't try to change, because it usually just causes problems later. It's true with anything. Alright, so now I'm going to connect the hot or the ungrounded in the same way. Another little tip I'll mention, if you're doing it like this with the loop, make sure you put the loop going in on the left side of the screw and not turned around like this. If you put it on like this, when you tighten the screw, that's going to try to spin around and it may not make as good a connection. So you always want to keep the wire in the same direction like that. I'm going to get this last one hooked up off camera, then we'll look at it. Alright, so we got the hot coming in on the top, going back out on the bottom, feeding that way. And the neutral from the supply is coming in at the top and going back out on the bottom, going that way. Your ground is tied into that. I still call everything the old names. The hot wire is actually called ungrounded. Your neutral is actually called your grounded. And your bare, which is always called ground or frame ground, is actually called your grounding conductor now. That's what you got to refer to them now. And then you just kind of want to fold the wires like this. So when you press it in, it kind of just folds itself together and compacts it. I've seen some people start twisting it, and you don't really want to do that. Now if you're putting in a whole bunch, you'll want to use a drill or an impact driver just to run these screws in, just barely snug it. But we're just going to use a screwdriver. You just want to screw these all the way in. And if you're replacing a receptacle, you need to space this out. They actually do make spacers that go in here to space it up so you can still tighten these two screws. Okay, at this point it's secure, and these are actually slotted like this, so you can kind of adjust this a little bit if necessary. So now you're ready to put your cover on. And this, ordinarily after the rough end inspection, you go in and do your drywall and everything, then you come back in and do your wiring and everything. But this is not going to be finished on the inside, at least not anytime soon. So then you just want to snug your screw up. Just barely snug it or it'll crack that plastic every single time. And that's that. It's your receptacle wiring. And once I get everything else done in here, we'll go back and check this to make sure it's working. Ordinarily I'd use a plug-in tester, but I can't find mine for some reason, so we'll have to check it with a voltmeter, so I'll show you how to do that. Alright, so I figured I'd share this with you. This is the last receptacle on the run. So there's only one wire coming in the box, and this is it. So you just run your bare ground wire straight to the screw. Also, you want to run the bottom screw, it's not being used, run them all the way in just so it's not sticking out. Just the best way to do it. Okay, this is not the best example of a breaker box to show you how to wire it, so we'll look at another box here in a minute, but this is the box that there's two circuits tied into. I'll use this same clip on the receptacle video and the light switch video. But your hot wire ties into the breaker. This is a square D box. Your grounding, which is the bare wire, will tie into the grounding block, and the white, which is your neutral or ungrounded or grounded, will tie in on the neutral strip. Alright, so this will be a little better example to show you, and this is going to be used in both the receptacle and the light switch video. Let's say this is the wire we just ran coming into the box. You trace the black wire. I'm just going to go straight into the breaker right here. These are 20 amp breakers. And your grounding will tie into the grounding bus on this side, and your neutral or grounded will tie in on the bus over here. You see over here. And that's how this box is wired. The other boxes that you seen earlier is actually fed off of this box. And anytime you do anything with the breakers, I recommend at least turning the main breaker off. Best to turn off your power coming in, if possible, from an outside disconnect or something. Because when this is on, your buses are hot down here, so you can't touch nothing down here. Alright, now we're ready to test it. I haven't tested it yet, so I don't know if it's even working yet. but these new type are kind of hard to do. Alright, we're getting 120 there, and you should also, this is your hot side where the red one's stuck in. I should pick up 120 here, but I shouldn't pick up nothing here, so you know it's working. So you're getting 120 across the ungrounded and the grounded, and you're getting 120 across the ungrounded and the grounding, but nothing across the grounded and the grounding, so you know everything's right and it's working. You want to check all your receptacles just in case you got something mixed up somewhere. Best way is the plug-in type, and it lights up and it shows you if anything's wrong. Faster and easier than using a voltmeter. I'm just showing you that you can use it the old way. Well guys, that's all for this video. If you got any questions or comments about receptacle installation and receptacle wiring, feel free to leave a comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I am a licensed journeyman electrician, and I should be able to help you get going in the right direction if you have any questions, so feel free to ask. So, thanks for watching guys. We'll catch you in the next one. The next video is going to be light switch wiring.